This is from this week's Torah portion too. I wanted to go over these 3 verses right here because they're very interesting to me.
They are.
Lo yavo fetsua daka.
Good. You're doing that really well. You really got it with the aleph.
What about the ayin?
The ayin, you need it deeper. It's not the same as aleph. It's in the same area in your throat, but it's not the same thing. With aleph, you're stopping the glottal flow of air. You know, you're closing your glottal stop. So that you got. Ayin, it's in the same region in your throat, but you're not closing anything. There's air coming through, but the muscles of your throat are constricted. So it's like
Okay.
Fasua. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Okay. So lo yavo fetsua dako. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Uchruth shafcha.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Bikal Adonai.
Yeah, and Hashem Adonai is the dalet with no dagesh.
Adonai.
Adonai. So like the th is in the word they.
Okay. Adonai.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Okay. Should I do another verse or?
Well, I think it's good to go to read it and then translate it, unless you just want to keep going and you're in charge.
Then we'll do that. Okay. Okay. Well, how about just read and translate one verse at a time?
Yeah.
Okay. So, lo yavo, there shall not come.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, is this Deuteronomy 23? Yeah.
Near there. I don't know.
Yeah.
That would make sense considering I don't know which chapter, but considering last week.
Well, the Christian Bible is different from the...
Is this like the end of the previous chapter?
Well, in the Christian Bible, this is verse 1.
Okay.
Instead of 2.
So they divide some verse differently, apparently.
I don't know what fetsua is. What's fetsua? What is that?
It means injured.
Oh, injured. Okay.
Yeah. When there's a terrorist attack, God forbid, anytime you hear in Hebrew the reports of terrorist attacks, you're going to hear this term, fetsuim.
Okay. Injured.
People who are injured. Yeah.
How about dako? What is that?
That means crushed, and it sounds similar to a word which means thin, but that's with the qaf, and this is a kaf.
You said thin. Thin.
So if it's the letter qaf, which is like the letter Q, not this letter, then it would be like thin. It's also this similar to the word for minute, but this is a kaf. So just that one not be confused between the two, because being that 99% of Jews pronounce kaf and kof the same way, then these two words sound exactly the same. But they sound different and they mean something different.
Okay.
So with the kaf, it doesn't mean minute or thin. It means like crushed or pressed.
Okay. An injury of
something's crushed.
Crushed, okay. A crushing type.
An injurious crush.
An injurious crush, there we go. There shall not come one with an injurious crush.
Mm-hmm. And it's supposed to be understood. I mean, context doesn't tell you, but like the Hebrew language, if one grew up in that language just as in English, like certain expressions are used that if you're completely divorced from that language as a living language, it might not make sense. So we know from Hebrew that this is an idiom in reference to a certain thing being crushed.
Okay, and uchruth is and cut off.
Yeah, it just means cut. It can mean cut off, depending on
Okay,
how the word appears.
and this is the same word as cut it.
Yeah, it's the same root.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it just means cut. Okay.
Right, it's not the same exact word, but it's the same basic word.
Shofecho. This is.
So, not to be gross, but this means spilling.
Spilling?
Yeah. So something is cut, and it apparently has some sort of spilling, which is noteworthy.
So what does that mean? I mean,
Well, this has to. Well, we know. Go ahead.
Well, it translates as his private member or something like that.
Male private members.
Yeah.
And of course, we know male private members, if it's healthy, there are two main aspects to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are called colloquially, I don't know if in biblical Hebrew it appears this way, but it certainly appears this way in ancient Hebrew. Testicles are generally called eggs. That's the actual, like, they use the Hebrew word for eggs when referring to testicles.
Mm-hmm.
So here, in both of these phrases, and you notice you have Fasua Dakka, that's one phrase, and then you have Khruth Shafakha. So these are four words, but the first two and then the last two, they each form a unit in reference to one particular of the two facets of the male sex organs.
Okay, yeah, and I see that with the trope marks too, that these are
right, but they don't refer explicitly to what this actually is. We know from Jewish tradition what this is referring to.
Okay.
So Fasua Dakka, that's talking about the testicles being crushed, basically, some sort of injurious crush.
Mm-hmm.
So probably like a eunuch. Both of these are things that could have happened to a eunuch. And then the second one is one that his member, not his not his testicles, but his actual member, is cut to some extent, but is substantial enough that something about it causes like a unnatural occurrence when he spills his seed. In other words, for him it's more like spilling as opposed to what normally happens in an unusual way.
Or urinating too, right? Or urinating.
Well, I'm explaining it from like having in mind what halakha explains about it.
Okay.
But I would assume, like, I would assume from what I read that he would have problems urinating also.
Okay. Okay. So bikal.
Mm-hmm.
Bikal in the congregation of Hashem. So why I don't understand this prohibition. I mean, I don't have to understand it, but I'd like to.
So not this verse, but the expression Bikhal Adonai, together with the word Lo Yovo, with the words Lo Yovo, he shall not come, Bikhal Adonai. Basically, this entire verse consists of Hebrew idioms. It's a great example of how divorced from the oral law, you can get like you can get all kinds of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So first of all, there's no explicit Hebrew term for sex or intercourse. There are a handful of expressions which are figurative. They are all figurative when referring to actual intercourse. So one which is widely known is to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
To know someone. And all of these particular idioms that I'm going to refer to, they all mean actual intercourse. They don't simply mean like fooling around or making out or even doing other sexual things. They refer to the actual act of intercourse. Mm-hmm. So you have what is widely known as to know someone, but you also have to lay with someone. And that means you could quote unquote lay with someone while actually standing up. So it's not referring to actual laying down. It's referring idiomatically to intercourse. Another term is to come. And I know English also has a idiom that's sexual, but this is sexual also, but it doesn't mean the same as the English profane word. So in Hebrew, he will come. I mean, it constitutes also what that would mean in English, but it includes more than that. It means like in the context of intercourse.
Okay.
So, and also, and that's not just in this verse. This is frequently in Jewish literature as well as in the Bible. I don't know how frequent in the Bible, but it occurs also in the Bible. And then when it says he will not come into the assembly of Hashem, this is not referring, as many people have misunderstood, and understandably so, it's not referring to any prohibition on them entering a synagogue or some assembly of worship. Rather, it's a reference to them marrying standard Israelites.
Oh,
so,
but it
go ahead.
also refers to Israelites, or is this referring to non? This is referring to Israelites as well as non-Israelites.
Absolutely. So I'm referring to normative Israelites. Not all Israelites are normative Israelites. Like a mamzer, for example. Mamzer is an Israelite by necessity. Like if you're not an Israelite, you can't be a mamzer. You familiar with the term mamzer?
Yeah. Is that like a bastard?
Yeah, but I mean that's the way it's often translated in English. In Christian translations, I don't know what the exact translation of it would be, but in Rabbinic Judaism, it's a specific status for. It's a status.
Yeah.
Right. And it can occur even if someone is not what in English is known as a bastard. In other words, even if a married couple has a child, there's the potential for that child to be a quote unquote bastard. That's just not the right word to use. I don't think there's not an English parallel for it.
Why would that be? How would that be?
So any Israelites who marry or have Israelites who have children who are not permitted by the Torah to have relations with each other, their offspring are called mamzerim. So it doesn't necessarily mean that like a woman went and cheated with someone and gave birth, though that could also be a mamzer.
Oh, you're meaning also like an illegitimate marriage.
Right. It can also be the offspring of an illegitimate marriage. Not only illegitimate relationship, i.e. adultery. It can be anything like that, but all among Israelites. It doesn't
like
occur
a brother and a sister. Like a brother and sister.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so okay. So what you're saying is this has nothing to do with a non-Jew worshiping in a Jewish synagogue or
nothing. And of course someone can argue that, but in rabbinic tradition it has nothing to do with that.
Okay, it has to do with a Jew actually not being prohibited from
a non-Jew is already forbidden from marrying the Jewish people in the normative understanding. I have an understanding which is not normative, but even that, it wouldn't be a regular non-Israelite. But the Torah already made it clear, idolaters across the board and non-Israelites were generally assumed to be idolaters. They're already forbidden. So, like, what's the need for this extra prohibition, right?
Okay. All right.
So, to come into the congregation of Hashem is in reference to being married or having relations with a normative Israelite, i.e. one who is not a mamzer and one who is not a convert. There are a few minor distinctions made in Jewish law between converts and native-born Israelites. But these are not, I mean, it depends. It could be a matter of opinion, but in my opinion, they're not substantial differences.
Could we speculate that the purpose for this law maybe is for the same reason that, well, just for the continuity of life and reproduction?
I'm sure it has something to do with that, but I don't think it's solely that, because when a woman is barren, let's say she already had children, but the husband can still have children, right? And she's reached menopause. He's not required to divorce her. Also, if both are unable to have children, they're not required to divorce, and they're not forbidden from having intercourse. In other words, intercourse isn't only about having children. What I suspect, and I'm speculating also, but I think it's somewhat backed up. And I'm not saying this would be to the exclusion of other scenarios, but I think that this is to discourage a cultural practice of making eunuchs.
Mm. Well,
Not only,
if
go ahead.
someone wanted to be a eunuch, they wouldn't want to get married either, right? I mean,
Not necessarily.
oh, really?
I mean, they could
Oh,
want
or someone.
a relationship with someone. I mean,
What if someone is already married and they?
right. It's a great question. These issues, for the most part, are covered in halakha. I don't remember everything about it, but it's covered.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I know that Bikal Adonai is understood to be in reference to marrying a normative Israelite. And when I say normative, I mean one who is native born to Israel and is not a mamzer.
Okay.
And it also excludes converts, right? So unless the halakha specifically also prohibits this to converts, it's usually not in reference to converts. Also, it's, for example, a convert is allowed to marry a mamzer. A convert is allowed to marry a mamzer, and a mamzer is allowed to marry a convert. But a mamzer is not allowed to marry a regular native-born Israelite. Mamzer can marry mamzer, and mamzer can marry converts. Converts can basically marry anyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, sorry, I wanted to contrast this verse also with Isaiah 56:4.
Okay.
It's this here. So, for thus says the Lord to the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, that choose the things that please me and take hold of my covenant. This is a different word, right? To the eunuch.
Yeah, completely different word.
And
But this is the standard word for eunuch right here. This is the normal word. Saris.
it's so
Here, this is referring to a specific condition of the genitalia. And it's referring to two different types. Perhaps that's why it doesn't just say saris here, because saris is broad. And if it had just said saris, a eunuch, one may think, oh, it's only referring to one type of eunuch and not another.
Sorry, what are the different types of eunuchs?
I mean, there could be even more than the two that are here, but in front of us are two types. You have one who may have nothing wrong with his, with the shaft, right? It may be completely intact, perhaps functional, I don't know. But they crushed his testicles or maybe removed them. And then you could have someone else who maybe still has testicles and has the ability theoretically to have children, but they emasculated him the other area, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So one might think, oh, one is permitted, but the other is not. So this is telling you both.
Oh, okay. Oh, and this is only talking about the one with the testicles?
Saris, it perhaps could be referring to either of those types, but the point is that there's more than one type of a eunuch. A eunuch is someone who's been emasculated. He, like in a physical sense, he's been neutered. So the definition of to what extent could be questionable, especially if it just simply says saris. So this makes it extra clear.
Okay.
Not that type and not that type.
Alrighty.
And perhaps this also refers to certain androgynous people, intersex people. I don't know. I see that as a possibility, though.
Okay. Okay. Next verse.
All right.
That helps though. That clarifies.
That also clarifies how King David can be a descendant of a Moabite woman when, as we'll see in the following verses, certain. Well, we'll get to it.
Yeah. Hold your horses. Okay. Lo yavo mamzer. Okay, so lo Lo yovo mamzer bikal Adonai gam. Is this how is the gimel here?
Regular G. Go.
Gam dor um asiri. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Lo yovo lo bikal Adonai. Okay. So there shall not come.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Translating literally.
Okay, or enter, right? A bastard.
Or have relations or marry.
Right. According to what you were telling me up here. Okay.
Right. And this is widely known. Like this is not common knowledge.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't know about secular Israelis, but among religious Jews who know Hebrew, it's common knowledge.
Wow. Thank you. That's great. Okay. Okay, there shall not marry a mamzer into the congregation of Hashem.
I think I might have figured out what mamzer is on a literal level. I don't know for a fact. I'm just speculating, but zar means foreign or different.
Oh, sorry.
Muzar means strange, odd. So perhaps mamzer is referring to the fact that this is an odd kind of, like it's the offspring of an odd or strange, i.e. foreign kind of a relationship which is foreign to what Hashem commanded.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, how about, okay, gam means evening, right?
No, it means also.
Gam means also.
Yeah.
But I don't know why what my one translation says evening.
Gam never means evening. Unless I'm missing some like really basic, like I've never ever seen that. And gam's a fairly common word.
You know what? I think it's because it's a Christian translation, and maybe they thought even meant evening in this.
Oh no.
Okay.
Yeah, gam could be even. Yeah.
Yeah, even, but not evening. Okay.
No.
Yeah, I know gam is also, or yeah, two or something like that. Right? Okay, gam. Also, door generation. Asiri, which is 10th.
Good.
Asiri is with the E. Is it my 10th?
Asiri. And the yud, of course, yud can mean that something is possessive, like my whatever, right? Yeah. But yud at the end of a noun can also mean that this is a description, that it's an adjective.
Okay, like
so here's an adjective for door.
Okay.
It's a masculine adjective. If it's a feminine adjective, it would be eat.
So also to the 10th generation.
Mm-hmm.
Lo yavo, he shall not marry. Lo bikal, to the congregation of Hashem. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
But you should. One of the things that people overlook when they think that this is referring to some sort of prohibition against certain people from ever joining, like the people of Israel, right? Because someone who's familiar with the biblical text, they should know that there is some sort of concept of strangers joining the people of Israel. It says kachem hagel. I don't remember word for word, but basically that the convert or the immigrant who joins with you shall be the same before me, one law and one Torah, right? So many people think these verses say that certain types of people can't join the people of Israel, but that's not what it's saying. It's referring, one, to marriage, and two, if it were saying that they can't join the people of Israel in any sense whatsoever, then you have to ask yourself, how do you determine when the 10th generation is? What is the starting point? What's it referring to? 10th generation from what? From when? So the answer here is 10th generation from their joining the people of Israel, meaning they did join the people of Israel, they're just not allowed to marry with native-born Israelite women.
Oh, that's if they're a convert, but this can also refer to non-converts, right? native-born Israelites that are
Correct.
Okay.
So here, in the context of a mamzer, it's talking about from the point of the status of being a mamzer, from the first mamzer in that line.
Okay. Mamzer has it hard, huh?
Yeah.
So a mamzer is someone from an adulterous relationship or an incestuous relationship.
Any sort of Torah prohibited relationship.
Is there another type besides adultery and incest?
Let's see. Adultery and incest. I'm not sure. I don't want to say no, but those are, of course, like the main ones. And there's also a mamzer de rabbanan for situations where there's doubt concerning the person.
Okay. I have another related question on that. So adultery is punishable by death, but only if there's witnesses, right?
Like everything, correct.
Okay. And these are eyewitnesses, and it must be at least two.
Absolutely, yep. And they have to fulfill a list of qualifications and cross-examinations.
And these two eyewitnesses are supposed to be the first to stone the perpetrators, right?
Right. And that's after he's pushed off a cliff and has a large boulder dropped on him. If he's still alive, then they stone him.
Okay.
Further.
Now, my question is, what if there are not witnesses, but it's admitted, and then they have this mamzer child? Is it still not punishable by death because it's not witnessed?
No, it's not punishable by death. There is a scenario when someone is guilty. There's a scenario where someone violates a Torah prohibition which does not incur death, but it's a Torah prohibition. I don't know the severity that it has to be, but at least somewhat severe. And he does it so flagrantly that on 3 different occasions he's found guilty with witnesses. So even though that Torah prohibition doesn't have a death penalty, because he did it so high-handedly on 3 different occasions, being found guilty each time, then on the 4th, I don't know if it's the 3rd time or the 4th time, he is then basically put to death indirectly, meaning they don't kill him by the standard means, and they don't directly kill him, but what they do is they starve him, and then they feed him, I think, barley or something like that. When he's starving, they feed him this, and it's some sort of grain or food that's able to expand a lot. So they get him starved so that he'll eat a lot of this once they bring it to him. Then after he eats a lot of it, they give him water so that it swells in his stomach, and then he dies.
Oh, wow.
In other words,
okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yep.
That's a more painful death, right?
I would think so. I don't know. Some part of me personally, I would rather die slowly but not violently than to die violently. But that's just me.
Well, I guess it fits the crime because it's a repeat, because of the repeat offense, right?
It's because of its high-handedness, repeated high-handedness.
Yeah.
The Torah never has punishments for like inadvertent transgressions, other than you just make a sacrifice.
Okay. Next verse. Okay. Lo yovo Ammoni.
Ammoni.
Lo yavo Ammoni umoavi.
You can do this one. Umoavi. There you go.
Bikal Adonai Gam Dor Asiri Lo Yovo lohem bikal Adonai ad olam. Ad olam.
Good.
Okay, so lo, there will not, yavo, come, or would this also be Mary?
Yeah.
Okay, Ammoni.
When people get married, they're assumed to be having relations.
Mm-hmm. So an Ammonite and a Moabite, neither an Ammonite or a Moabite shall marry Bichal Adonai into the congregation of Adonai. Gam, also Dor Asiri, to the 10th generation. Lo Yavo, he shall not marry. Lohem, them, or to them, right? Bichol Adonai, in the congregation of Hashem, Ad Olam, forever. One says to the 10th generation, and then the other one says forever. Why is that?
Yep. So either 10th generation is just a figure of speech for forever, or forever only means just beyond 10th generation.
That's weird.
Yep.
Well, it says even the 10th generation shall never enter the assembly of the Lord.
Okay. I think they're trying to be ambiguous. I know that the mamzer, for whom it doesn't say ad olam, rabbinic law forbids him forever, like, and his children and his children and his children. Of course, like, if the identity of the person as a mamzer, or like as a descendant of a mamzer, or a descendant of Ammonites, if that identity is lost, then it doesn't apply. It's only as long as that is attributable to them.
Well, how would it not?
Perhaps that's why it says ad olam. I don't know. So what?
Okay, what you're saying is that for verses 2 and 3, actually, no, just for verse 2, no, just for verse 3, this says to the 10th generation, but rabbinic law makes it forever?
I don't know that it's rabbinic, but that's the way the rabbis interpreted the Torah. Like, there's a difference between rabbinic interpretation of the Torah and rabbinic laws in, like, Hanukkah or something.
Right. So, but, okay, and they probably got that interpretation from this right here.
Right.
The 10th generation shall never enter.
Yep.
So the rabbinic law is that these shall never enter, not even past the 10th generation.
Right.
Okay.
But of course, this is as long as they have that identity. Once that's lost, then, I mean, what are you going to do? And maybe that's why it says Dor Asiri and then it says forever.
Why? I don't.
Because there's a undetermined amount of generations that need to pass before the person would be, like, the descendants of such a person would be allowed to marry a native Israelite. But so it, in a sense, it's forever, but at the same time, it's not technically forever once the identity or association of these Israelites is lost in association with Ammonite, Moabite, or Mamzer.
Lost means just forgotten, right?
Forgotten, correct.
This is very sad to me.
Yep.
Okay, anyways.
And I mean, you have the same principle in Jewish law for all the tribes and everything, basically, that a person's status is not lowered. Like, if you have a priest, how does it go? I don't remember the exact way it goes, but basically, like, if there was some Israelite today who his father's father's father, going all the way back, was actually a servant of Israel, and he was never freed, right? So by the letter of the law, this person alive today is still a servant. But rabbinic law says that we don't retroactively go and lower that person's status based on some historical reality. In other words, once it's established that such and such person is kosher, then he's considered kosher.
How is he rendered kosher?
Simply because it's been forgotten.
Okay. Okay. So if someone digs up their past, oh well.
Their ancestry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And as we learned last time, servants of Israel are not non-Jews. They're called B'nai Brit. So they're members of the covenant.
Okay. What are you saying? I don't understand what you're trying to say.
Say what?
I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm saying that this is not to say that a non-Israelite is like magically conferred Israelite status. There was clearly a connection to the covenant, even if it was a servant. Like even if someone's ancestor was actually a non-freed servant.
They have to have committed to the covenant of Torah.
Well, they couldn't have been a servant otherwise.
Well, I thought they could just acknowledge the
7 laws of Noah?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then they wouldn't be a servant. They would be hired.
Okay. Yes.
It would be a hired worker. What's called a socher.
Oh, they couldn't be a slave?
No. The only Israelite slaves, quote unquote, have to accept the Torah. They enter the covenant of Israel.
But that's just for, but if they, okay, so trying to put together everything that I've learned. If they only accept the Noahide laws, then they could potentially be a slave forever. If they accept the full covenant, then they can be freed on the 7th year, just like the other Israelite servants.
I understand why you're saying that, but no. The Eved Ivri, the Israelite, what's called a Hebrew, not Israelite, what's called a Hebrew servant, he can be freed after 7 years. But what's called in Halacha Eved Kanani, or just a standard Eved, he is never freed automatically, like just by passage of time. He can be required to be freed, meaning his owner can be required to free him if he does certain actions, like if he publicly does certain actions that attest to his having embraced all of the Torah and not just the Torah as it applies to females. But if someone never embraced the covenant of Torah, all they did was accept the 7 laws of Noah, they can't be a servant ever. They could be hired, but they have to be paid. That confuse you?
No, it didn't confuse me, but that goes against what I learned from Asher in his
What Asher say?
What I said before, that full conversion was a way for an Israelite slave to be freed.
Right. Well, see, it's retroactive. That's correct, but it's retroactive. Once the servant, meaning non-native born servant, once he is freed, he's automatically converted, meaning his status turns into that of a regular convert. But it's retroactively based on the immersion that he did before ever entering into servitude. He can't enter into servitude until he does a quasi-conversion, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
He has to accept the Torah, but he has to accept binding upon himself the Torah as it applies to females. But once he's freed, if he's freed, then he's automatically a regular convert.
What do you mean the Torah?
And he doesn't have to be immersed because it relies on the immersion that he did at the beginning of his servitude.
What do you mean the Torah as applies to females? I don't understand.
So you're aware that there are different obligations between males and females, right?
Yeah, but
Right. But yet we go ahead.
But if he's a man,
Mm-hmm.
so go ahead. I don't understand.
Right. I understand your conundrum. So when a Israelite servant, and maybe I shouldn't be saying that. I'm saying that to accentuate the fact that he's a member of the covenant, but I don't mean that he's an Eved Ivri. I don't mean he's a Hebrew slave. The biblical term Hebrew servant, that's specifically in reference to a native born who will be freed after 7 years. But the other types of servants, they undergo a type of conversion, meaning they embrace the faith of Israel and they accept the Torah as binding upon them. However, they're not accepting as binding upon them all the commandments of male Israelites. That would be being immersed for full conversion. Rather, what they're doing is they're accepting upon themselves the Torah as a whole unit, but not with regard to the specific commands applying to them as an Israelite male. In the same way that when a female converts, she accepts the entire Torah, but she's not accepting upon herself the commandments of Israelite males. So a male servant who is not a native born, when he is immersed, he's accepting the Torah as a unit, but he's not accepting all the commands as a whole that apply to Israelite males. What he's doing is he's accepting the commandments of the Torah as they apply to Israelite women.
Like the prohibitions.
The prohibitions, the holidays, right? Okay. But not the time-bound. Are you familiar with the principle? Right. So he's not accepting time-bound.
Such as having to make pilgrimage.
Right. Unless it's one that applies to females.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yep.
All right. Next verse. All right. Okay, so lo. This kind of seems like. Did we already do this?
Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh no. Okay. No. This was the last verse, but I wanted to. I heard about I think it's in the Talmud about that David was not. There was a controversy regarding whether David had legitimate status as a king because he was a descendant of a Moabite.
Right. So I don't know what was debated there, but I know that the halakha, as the Rambam brings it, is that this prohibition only applies to males.
Yeah.
Male Ammonites and male Moabites.
Yes. But I mean, it wasn't Rambam that interpreted it first. It was in the Talmud.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just saying I'm not familiar with the discussion in the Talmud.
So there's another reason why we need the oral law and the oral tradition, because otherwise you could agree that David wasn't illegitimate.
I mean, even the belief that Jesus is the Messiah has to rely on this type of oral interpretation. Otherwise, what do you do with this verse we're looking at right now? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're also saying they can't even enter into the assembly of Israel, and we don't take that to refer just to marriage of male Moabites, but we take it to refer to any kind of Moabite or Ammonite, and we interpret assembly of Hashem as a reference to the congregation of Israel, like the community of Israel, then what is King David, you know? It definitely adds some kind of doubt.
Oh, okay. So what?
And the very messiahship of even Jesus is based on that. What I'm saying is that there are a lot of things in Christianity that rest even on rabbinic Judaism.
Okay, so you're saying because Jesus' lineage in the New Testament is traced to David.
It's claimed as legitimate based on his going back to David, right?
And therefore, without the oral law, David is an illegitimate king
Right,
of Israel.
right.
Now,
But of course, it's not really a problem because Jesus, I mean, at least in certain passages, quite clearly embraced the oral law. He was just opposed to hypocrisy.
yeah.
But that's not the standard Christian view.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about. I heard the How does the Samaritan? I don't know if you know anything about this though.
I know a little bit about Samaritans, but
How
not
does the
not a lot.
Samaritan tradition differ in terms of? Isn't it a little bit different in the Samaritan tradition regarding the kingship of David?
Yeah, vastly. They don't accept it.
Oh, so the Samaritans do not accept David as a legitimate
No,
king?
nope, nope.
Okay, so the Samaritan scriptures do not include.
It's only the Torah, their version of the Torah, which isn't drastically different, but it is significantly different on a few specific places with regard to Har Gerizim specifically,
Yeah.
the Mount Gerizim. But their sacred scriptures is just the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and they also, you could say, give a level of scriptural status to I don't know how similar it is to the book of Joshua, but it's something parallel to the book of Joshua. And then they have a few other kind of historical type books.
Okay, so
which I'm not familiar with, but I know they exist.
They completely reject kings.
They reject basically the vast majority of the Tanakh, of the Old Testament.
So when did the Samaritans break off from Israel?
Assumedly, it had something to do with the split between the northern and southern kingdoms, because originally the Samaritans joined the people of Israel. That's clear. And
that's way after.
Way after what?
Way after David.
I don't know. No, of course it's way after David. Of course. The northern and southern kingdom split in Solomon's lifetime.
So then how could they reject David as a legitimate king if
No, they reject what I'm saying is that there's a difference between the original Samaritans and modern day Samaritans. They are the same people in the sense that like that's their ancestry. I'm not denying that. So they are the Samaritans. But in the rabbinic tradition, there's a philosophical, and in the biblical tradition, there is a philosophical or halachic difference between what they do today and what they originally did. What they originally did was submitted to the priests who were sent to them, as recorded in the Book of Kings. They submitted to them and learned Torah as they were taught. But at some point, and I'm speculating it may have had something to do with the split or the rift that grew between the northern and southern kingdoms. At some point, they disputed that authority of the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. And I know that when they came and joined the people of Israel, that was already during the era of that split. I don't know or recall the details of the split of the northern and southern kingdom, and I'm sure there's a lot that no one knows that we can only speculate about. But there was clearly there were cultural differences between the northern and southern kingdoms, and even though they embraced the Torah, according to the Talmud, a significant portion of them never fully abandoned idolatry. And it could be, and actually, according to the Talmud, they had a giant dove-shaped statue or rock formation on Mount Gerizim, which they worshipped. Of course, today they don't do that, so I'm not claiming that they do that. And I wouldn't, from an academic perspective, I wouldn't say that it's not possible that perhaps the rabbinic tradition regarding that idolatry is exaggerated, or maybe even a misunderstanding of something. I don't know. But they clearly, from an early time, they attributed something special to Har Gerizim, even though they weren't originally from there. And I think that could have something to do, again, with the difference between the northern and southern kingdom, that it was kind of like oppositions, like the southern kingdom had Jerusalem, so the northern kingdom made their own like special place.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it was necessarily associated with idolatry, but that happened apparently somewhere early on. The split started somewhere early on, at some time early on. And by the way, something that very few people know, I've never heard anyone talk about it, ever. I assume there are a number of people who are aware of it. That is the fact that in rabbinic law, Talmudic law, as codified by the Rambam and as appears in the Shulchan Aruch, which supposedly everybody embraces, tongue-in-cheek, according to both of them, the status of Samaritans is kagoy. Kagoy is significant. That term, you know what ka means as a prefix to a word, right? Like, comparable to. But it doesn't mean it's the same exact thing. The same term is used for an Israelite who violates Shabbat publicly. Mm-hmm. And you see this reflected in a number of laws in rabbinic literature where the way we relate to Samaritans is significantly different from the way we relate to other non-Jews or other non-Israelites. In other words, rabbinic literature doesn't say that they're just non-Jews. Even the Rambam and even in the Shulchan Aruch, it doesn't just simply say, oh, they're not Israelites. Rather, it says that they converted, and we relate to them as though they are not Israelites, for the most part. But then there's specific scenarios where we relate to them as though they are members of the covenant.
Like what?
I think one scenario is with regard to Shechita, and there are a few other scenarios also. I can't remember them all. Seems like one may be related to Yain Nesech also, to wine libations. There may be a number of things. I don't remember them all.
So
go ahead.
So it's if a Samaritan, let's say, wanted to marry a Jew, would it be like Baal Teshuvah instead of
right, correct. They would just simply need to disassociate with the
Samaritan traditions.
Right, and also I strongly suspect, reasonably thinking, that if the sages knew that they had all abandoned idolatry, then despite the differences among a myriad of halachic details, the mere fact that the sages would know that they have completely abandoned idolatry as they are today, I think that they would have been even more warm toward them in the edicts that they made with regard to them.
But they still hold that Mount Gerizim is the mount and not.
Yeah. But that's not akin to idolatry, unless one says that any deviation from ritual practice equates to idolatry. But it's not that simple. Idolatry is when it's not just that you do some sort of practice that is ritually different, but it's when you do a certain practice in worship of something other than the Creator. Mm-hmm. Or like if you worship the Creator, but through the mediation of adoration of something other than God.
Okay.
But they don't do that anymore. I mean, they're monotheistic.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Alrighty.
Yep.
That was fun. I'm going to stop this now.
Okay. Goodbye.